Hi, this is Claire from Tree Sisters. This is session 3. If you weren't with me yesterday, session 2, in which I spoke about probably the most powerful experience of my life in terms of how grief can throw you into your creativity and past immobilization, that'll be moving off down the Facebook page as soon as this one is live. The first news of this morning is I woke up to over 27,000 trees per month now for the Million Trees campaign, which takes us past, well, we're fractionally below 330,000 trees for the year if we were to stop now, which we won't. So to all of you who've come on overnight, and I know that some of this will be due to the stunning Eve Ensler interview that we did yesterday, thank you so much for choosing to make giving back to trees part of the air that you breathe. It matters. Every single one of us waking up to our responsibility to start cooling down Gaia rather than heating her up all the time. You matter. Thank you so much for joining us and becoming a tree sister. And one of the reasons I planned on doing this experiment of Facebook Lives every day was to model what it's like to step out over your comfort zones. And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, you know, how real am I willing to be? How honest am I willing to be in the moment about what this is actually like? And given that everything's an experiment, I just wanted to share what this is like, because half an hour before I sit down to do this, I start sweating, I start shaking, my whole nervous system starts screaming to not do it. And last night, I actually felt mad. I felt completely mad. I felt myself starting to split, and I felt the part of me that was getting bigger and bigger through doing session 2 yesterday, saying, everything you're saying is crap, everything you're saying is crap. In the middle of last night, it was, I didn't really know myself anymore. And I felt boxed into a corner by the parts of me that say, you know, who the hell do you think you are to try and raise your voice? You know, to say that humanity needs to do anything. You know, here I am saying, what could women do if we tried to bring our hearts to a potential identity shift for humanity away from a consumer species to a restorer species? Last night it felt like the most preposterous thing in the world, and I should just crawl into a hole. And why I'm saying all of this is because I believe this happens to every single one of us, and it's a main reason why so many of us have these extraordinary ideas and they never go anywhere. Because this is thousands of years worth of conditioning for each of us that is sitting inside each of us. It's in the collective consciousness of women, it's in our bodies, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA that says it is just too dangerous as a woman to come out front, that being female is somehow less than, and how dare you have a go. And so knowing that, and also knowing that I've got the through line of the trees, which is okay, no matter how weird I feel, no matter how frightened I feel, what matters to me more than the fears that are dogging me already is that I love this world of ours. I love this world of ours so much, and I cannot bear for it to, I cannot bear for her to be destroyed just because we couldn't be bothered to wake up and change our behaviours, because we're brilliant and amazing and we can do anything if we want to, we just have to choose. So to all of you out there who have had ideas and who have let them go down, Tree Sisters would never have got as far as she's got now were it not for the women standing around me who every time I go, oh my God, I can't do it, I just don't have it, turn around and say, it's an experiment, you cannot fail, just get up and keep going. Alone, it's hard. In sisterhood, surrounded by people who understand who you actually are, things become possible. So I'm well aware that just giving money to the tropics every month isn't going to make the massive change that we need. It's going to make a huge change. When we have 700,000 women, it's going to be 1 million trees a day. That is going to change the face of the world. But the deep change has to happen inside each of us, where we reorient ourselves to ourselves, because we are nature. And when that happens, we're not going to be saying, please will you give? We're going to be saying, okay, now that we're all giving, now what can we bring of ourselves? What are our gifts? and how do they need to be put in service? And I'll be talking more and more about that through the week. So, I spoke about grief yesterday. I'm going to do it again today. Why am I doing that? Grief is probably, I think, the most powerful catalyst for creativity of anything I know. I've come to relish my crying fits now when they come, because I know that if I fully give myself to it, if I let my heart break, what is actually happening in that crying is the grief of being somehow split is becoming conscious, and the grieving closes the split. And when I'm done grieving, I can't even remember why I started. I'm just flat out in some new creative idea. What about this? What about this? What about this? So I know now, because I've done it so many times, if I just cry, really cry, if I let myself be broken open and moved, out the other side of it, I'm going to be more on task, more on purpose, more unstoppable, more undeniable. And that's what I want, because I want to become the fullest expression of myself that I can be. And I am only as far as I've got, which is still baby steps. I'm only as far as I've got because of my capacity and my willingness to grieve. And I watched The Most Dangerous Man in America a few weeks ago, Daniel Ellsberg, who brought out the Pentagon Papers and helped bring down Nixon and the Vietnam War. And there's a point in that film where he's confronting the fact that if he does what he knows he has to do, he's going to risk being in jail for the rest of his life. And he talks about going into the cubicle in a men's toilet and just sitting there and howling and howling and howling and crying unstoppably, couldn't stop, couldn't handle himself, couldn't get a grip of himself at all, and came out and started publishing the Pentagon Papers, because the part of him that was split in fear came back together again, and there was his courage on the other side. That's what I was talking about yesterday with the ritual theatre in session 2, where being confronted with reality and getting a fully embodied experience of it shifted me, where I knew I had to do something on behalf of the feminine and I had to do something on behalf of nature, even though back then I didn't have a clue what it would be. And the story I'm about to tell you now is the next part, where it wasn't just me, it was a collective awakening, which makes it even more important. And before I say it, I want to talk about a phenomenon which really annoys me and which is endemic, and which I'm going to talk about again in the week to come. I don't know how long I'm going to be doing these things. It's the my eyes glaze over phenomenon. I've actually stood up and done talks, public speaking, where I've had the whole room fully with me. I have the capacity to really, really reach a room. And then I start talking about statistics. I start talking about what's actually happening in the world. And people literally reach into their handbags and get their mobile phones out and start texting. And just sort of turn away and start looking at anything else. There's this sort of auto-defense mechanism that happens where it's like, okay, now we're about to get real. I have to disconnect. And I've stood there and I've gone quiet and I've said, would you like to put your phones back in your bags and actually listen to what I'm about to say? Because if you let in what I'm about to say, your lives may change. And instead of being so afraid of facing where we are, if you can understand that if you let this in, you may be spurred to action that makes more sense of your life, that makes you feel less schismic, less like you're an alien walking around on a planet that makes no sense, and more like yourself. So my invitation to you as I tell this story, if you feel yourself going into an eyes glaze over and, really there's something else I should do, please stay with me. Please stay and take the journey of this story with me. Because this is one of the hardest things I did, and it made the biggest difference in my life. So this was a gift of the Pachamama Alliance, the Awaken the Dreamer Symposium. And it was John Love who came over to England to do the first ever version of it, to see whether the trainings would come over to the UK. And Awaken the Dreamer came from a woman, Lynn Twist, who went into the Amazon rainforest because she had a dream that she was being called, and that the Achua people in the rainforest were basically saying, if those of us in the modern world, so-called modern world, didn't change our dream, we were going to take the world down. So they created the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, which was a journey basically through a day where you were led through different experiences. And part of that experience is the session that is called Where Are You Now? And Where Are You Now was very possibly one of the most traumatic things I've ever heard, but also that was it. None of us have been the same since. So there were all of these very well-known scientists basically saying 90% of the great fish in the ocean are gone. You know, the scientists didn't know about this, they didn't believe it, but they're gone. Bear in mind, this is probably 10 years ago now, so God only knows how many we've got left now. You know, 75% of the forests are gone. This is the amount of fish that have gone. This is the amount of just these statistics, which were, you know, elephants on the absolute verge of extinction, tigers on the absolute verge of extinction, cancer going through the roof, mental illness going through the roof, suicide going through the roof. And we got the sort of the pulse of where are we ecologically, spiritually, and social justice-ly. And none of it was pretty. In fact, all of it was completely horrific. I had no idea that we were in the midst of the 6th great extinction. I had no idea that we're losing species every day. I hadn't appreciated that one of the main issues with climate change is that as the seasons change, the migratory patterns of the species that are moving all over the place haven't yet. And so when they're showing up to the places that they go to feed, the food isn't there because it's either already blossomed or it's yet to come. So there is mass starvation going on all over the planet, and nobody seems to know. So we were in this room, and there was a group of us on the back seat. It was my partner Alex and Trenna and Bernie and John, and we were literally on the back row of this huge room full of people, and the wall was right behind us, just like this is now. And as we're going through this Where Are We Now session, it's like you can't breathe. It's like, how do you take this in? And Brian Swim so brilliantly says, you know, our hearts have opened to the extent that we can grieve the loss of a dear friend or a family member or a pet, but how do you grieve the loss of entire species? How do you grieve the loss of a whole way of life? How do you grieve the loss of our seasons? And the room was going into shock. We were completely going into shock. And by the end of this session, what I think happened was literally the people at the front were like, can't handle it, threw it back. And the next people in the row behind them, can't handle it, throw it back. And this wall of grief just like slammed to the back of the room. And there's nowhere for it to go. It got stuck on the back row. And those of us on the back row just broke, completely broke. Bernadette, who was sitting next to me, who co-founded Tree Sisters with me, was hysterical on the floor. John and Alex were in each other's arms sobbing. They had to stop for a while because we were incoherent and loud with it. It was like, we got the gift. Like, we didn't know we were getting the gift in that moment. We just thought that the world was coming to an end and there was nothing we could do. But here's the thing. Bernadette became a trainer for Pachamama, went over to America. Alex, that day, quit his job and shifted towards something that became Empower Community. He's now doing solar power for the hard done by of England. God, I'm losing the power of speech here. He's doing incredible things. John, again, picked up and went to San Francisco to join Pachamama and has been with them ever since. Trenna started writing a book, Be the Change. And I went off on this pilgrimage to find what it was that was going to make sense of me, that was going to bring the feminine voice forward, and ended up going to India and being with Project Greenhands, which I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow, which is where the trees properly landed. But the point is, we're so afraid of hearing the facts because we don't know what to do. But the truth is, or at least here's what I believe, I think if we're alive now, it's because part of us wanted to be part of this change. There is no greater turning point for humanity than the one that we're in now. And so if we're here now, we have a part to play. And part of that job that we have is to face reality. Because when you face reality and you let it in, it's terrifying. And it's galvanizing. It becomes the most extraordinary permission. It's, you know, we've got everything to play for because everything is on the line. Literally everything is on the line. And I think about today's children, you know, if your 7-year-old in 5 years' time is 13 and turns around and can see that the seasons are pretty much gone because it's going to happen really fast now, and says, but what did you do? You knew, you know, you already knew, that known for 20 years that climate change was happening. What did you do? Do you want to say, well, actually, I looked away. You know, I didn't do anything. I don't want that for our species. I want today's kids to be able to turn around and say, what did you do? And we said, we did everything. We did everything we could. There was another statistic that I want to share because it was another of those like, oh, moments for me. I went to a salon in South Kensington with Synchronicity Earth a few years ago, and I can't remember the organisation, the World Steward, can't remember, it'll come. But a major forest organisation was there, and they basically said, they kind of mapped out the global forest, you know, not just the rainforest, which is where I'm focused, but the whole global forest. And they said all of it is already marked out as concessions. And a concession is basically where it's already been earmarked for oil extraction or mining or timber or palm oil or, you know, whatever it is, soya or beef farming. It's already been said, yes, you can have this patch and you can have that patch. There is no forest remaining on this planet anywhere that is not a concession. Which means the human demise is mapped out already. There is a version of reality up front if we don't do something drastic where our forests are gone. When we tip over, 45–50% of the forests are gone. The rest of them will probably die anyway. That's the research that's been done. This is a state of absolute emergency. This should be on the front lines everywhere. And it's not. And it stuns me. And I sat there and I said, are you telling me that there is no protected forest left? He said, well, there's forest that's protected, but everything is actually, you know, people know that they can have access to that land. And I was saying, well, you know, can you give us the map? Like, we've got to scream about this. Can you give us the map? Can you get it out there? And he's saying, well, you know, some areas have already been given to 3 and, you know, we can't get accurate numbers about this. And it was just, I left again in complete shock. It was like looking, you know, when you do an operation on somebody and you draw on them, say this is the bit that we're going to cut. It was like looking at a woman's body and every inch of her had been diced and sliced. Every inch of this planet is up for grabs because our species thinks that the flipping is to use everything and turn it into something. What if the pinnacle of this species is actually to see everything and then to figure out how to bring it into its fullness? If we have to use things, how do we use them respectfully? If we have to take things, how do we give back? That's my prayer. And that's why I'll do this thing of coming out every day and saying, try this experience on. See if you can let it into you. See if you can let your heart break. See if you can let yourself feel it. Because once your heart has broken, and all it takes is a lot of tears and snot, and that really doesn't matter. But what it unleashes in you can be a pathway to pure joy and creativity. Because to feel yourself on task, supporting this exquisite world that means so much to each other is unbelievably precious, and we can all have that. We can all have that. Oh, so the Million Trees campaign is part of the potentizing of the beginning of Tree Sisters message. So this month, we want to see if we can get to 100,000 trees a month. We're at 27,000. Okay, we've got a little way to go, but it's growing. 3 days ago, it was 19,000. That is, you know, we're heading for the 500,000 trees a year. And then beyond that, it's going to be 1 million trees a year. Beyond that, it needs to be 1 million trees a month, 1 million trees a week, 1 million trees a day. It is so easy to get there because we all have the capacity to give. We do. And my prayer, my request, my invitation to all of you, please become a tree sister. Becoming a tree sister is a gift to yourself and to the world. When you become a tree sister, you get access to so many of the gifts that we are creating for women. Tools, experiences, journeys that are purely designed to help reconnect us to everything that matters, including our deepest longings, intuitions, instincts as women, so that we can bring forward a different kind of leadership. When you join, you'll see all the benefits laid out on the Join In page. That is treesisters.org, and go to the Join page. But the Million Trees campaign, please can you help us spread the word? So many of you asking, what can I do? If these Facebook Lives touch you, can you spread them? Can you share them? Can you share them repeatedly? Can you go to milliontreescampaign.com and spread that link? Help people watch the little film that shows you exactly where we're planting in Brazil, what it looks like, what these forest corridors look like, in Kenya where we're reforesting the slopes of Mount Kenya, the agroforestry we're doing in southern India, and the stunning mangrove forests in Madagascar. The more and more of us come in, the more trees we can be planting, and then we can diversify and bring in more projects from all around the world. It's just up to whether we are willing to say, yes, I get it. It's time to start cooling our mother. It's time to start giving back. Yes, I want to be part of a restorer species. Please help me spread the word. Please help make it normal to think about giving back, not just taking all the time. So tomorrow at 10:30 Pacific time, I'm going to talk about the next stage of my journey, which was where the trees found me finally, and all the dots started joining care of the experience from the Pachamama Alliance. I really hope that you'll be with me then, and I will tell you where the tree figures are at that point. Thank you for joining me.